I was once on a retreat with Eckhart Tolle up in Cortez Island off the west coast of British Columbia. And most of the, in fact, all of the retreat was sort of like today, drizzly, cold. And at one point he said, most people think that, the ideal circumstances for awakening during a retreat would be, perfect weather, everything just right. Said, no, actually, this is sort of takes away the possibility of, just feeling good because it's a nice day. Which is what we do, right? When everything's going right, we feel good. Something happens that's a little more challenging, we feel bad. Sort of like the stock market, you could plot good days, bad days, up, down. Good trend here, folks. So this is what we've done with our survival instinct, right? From way back when, a few generations ago, not all that many actually, when our ancestors were running around on the plateau, trying to distinguish between this animal and that animal. This is good to eat, that one's going to bite me. So the mind developed this ability to distinguish, okay, this is good for me, this is not. And, now a few hundred generations later, the tigers are all in the zoos, pretty much. And yet the same instinct is running. And because it's, those kinds of, where to get food, where to avoid dangerous animals, that kind of survival instinct is no longer problematic for most of us most of the time. I mean, we may step off the curb and suddenly be faced with a bus headed our way, and that survival fright might kick in. But generally, that whole instinct has been put to other uses, where it's all not so much about physical survival, it's about psychological survival. What's good for me, what's dangerous for me, what's beneficial for me, right? And so we spend an enormous amount of energy trying to manage that, planning our days, worrying about who might say what to us. Trying to maneuver our way through life so that nothing too bad happens. Hopefully more pleasant things happen. The really interesting thing about that is that when we look back on our lives, probably the times that have been most transformative are the times that have been the most difficult, right? The times we wouldn't have chosen for ourselves are the times that are actually the times when we learn the most. When everything's going good, life is good, everything's working my way, I've got a pretty good job, pretty good house, pretty good relationship, everything's cool. There's not much motivation there to go looking for anything deeper than that. Life's working. But if we're really lucky, somewhere along the way, there's either some sort of deep-seated urge that we have for no reason that can be easily explained, or something dramatic happens that forces us to look from a different perspective. And so often people come into the spiritual search, you could say, after difficult circumstances. You know, it's like, okay, however it is that I'm viewing the world isn't working for me. You know, for a lot of people, depression is something that arises often or for a long time, continuously. But, I mean, and there may be, you know, chemical reasons for that in some cases, but I would suspect that in a lot of cases, it's really our body informing us that something's not quite right. You know, what we're doing isn't working. And that's the challenge from this ego state, because the ego state is this sense of trying to manage our lives to make it work. You know, maneuvering our way through life and hoping something not too bad happens before we die. That's the plan. That's the strategy. But somewhere along the way, I mean, for a lot of us, that clothing that we're wearing feels too tight. You know, it's like OJ trying to put on his glove. You know, it just feels uncomfortable, like it's, you know, what I am feels constrained by this sense of who I am that seems to be functioning in the world. And it feels so close that it feels like, well, that's just the way I am, you know. Just how I was brought up, you know, and now it's me. That's sort of the conclusion. And the part of that creates anxiety in our life is that it's so fragile. Does it not feel like that? It feels solid in a sense, like, you know, it's always there, I can't really escape from it, you know, there's this anxiety or shyness or fear or hurt or guilt or all of these things that sort of constrain me. They feel solid, and yet at the same time, you know, we're always trying to manage them, to negotiate with them. There's something in us that's, isn't it? Doesn't it feel like that we're trying to negotiate with parts of ourselves? Like, okay, you know, I'll let you eat that gallon of ice cream tonight, you know, as long as it'll make you happy, you know. It'll be good. So we're always trying to manage these things in ourselves that feel like not quite under our control, but feel so strong that we have no choice. We've got to deal with them as best we can. Maybe we can ignore them. Maybe we can placate them. Maybe we can drug them. Maybe we can sedate them somehow. Maybe we can distract ourselves long enough that at least we can forget about it for a few hours. Anybody done all those things? So that's the game that we're playing with ourselves. You know, there's this sense of, you know, that's just the way I am, and I've got to somehow manage that and still find my way in the world. You know, I can't really let it be known exactly what's going on in myself. I have to pretend to have it together, to be professional, to be a parent, to be, you know, a good employee, whatever. And so we trot that persona out in the world. And that's fine too, to, you know, try to accommodate the world in that sense as best we can. But if underlying that, it feels like there's sort of this, you know, volcanic activity happening, then that we're always trying to manage or keep at bay, deal with. Sometimes it erupts, right? And we can feel bad about that. So this is all the consequence of one fundamental innocent misunderstanding. Just one. And that is that who I am is limited to what I think, what I believe, what I've been taught, what opinions I have, what my personality is. Just an innocent belief that that is what defines who I am. That's it. If we believe that that's who we are, and it's problematic for us, then we're always trying to change that, right? But what is it that's trying to change that? It's just another thought, another, belief that, okay, that's who I am, but this is who I should be. Right? So we think that's somehow a more elevated part of ourselves, like, the parent, telling the unruly child, behave. The child says, no, I do what I do, and hey, deal with it. And so there's this battle that goes on internally, but we think as long as we hold on to this, sort of what we think is a higher self, being able to tell our unruly self, as long as we hold on to that image of, well, at least I know what I should be, right? Then at least I've got, at least I'm holding a higher ground. There might be, armies attacking me down there, but at least I hold the higher ground. But it's all just mind, all of it. The idea of what we should be, the idea of what we think we are, and that battle, the mind loves it. Mind loves conflict, have you noticed? For example, just something totally innocent. You're walking out the door and you stub your toe on the door. Okay, stub your toe. But then the thought comes in, I'm always stubbing my toe. Then the next thought comes in, I'm a clumsy person. Right? You see how it sort of gets more and more global here? And then the next thought might come in, I'm always screwing up. I'm an unworthy person. Now it's getting really big, right? Just the only thing that happened is you stubbed your toe, but we tend to generalize about that. We forget about the 99.9999% of the times we're not stubbing our toe and focus on the one time that we are. And so we play this game in our head where we're the prosecuting attorney, we're the judge, we're the jury. And then we've got sort of an ineffective defensive attorney that sort of pleads our case, but not very well. Guilty as charged. It's all happening in our head, right? All those voices we adopted somewhere during our life. We weren't born with any of them. In fact, we spent first maybe a year and a half of our life absent of that thinking process. Still perfectly alive, right? Perfectly there, seeing what was happening, but it just wasn't being reduced to thought. So that, as we begin thinking, it begins, we're we've been taught from a very early age that we are a separate individual. And appearances seem to justify that. You know, we all look different, all different ages, different abilities, different everything. So it seems obvious, you know, almost even to question that, you know, depending on who you do it to, may get you drugged or committed, or even to question that I'm not a separate individual. Especially in this country, they value, you know, strong, individualistic, you know, I'm going to go out and be myself in the world. So there's this whole culture, you know, we've all been taught that what we are is a separate individual. That we all have a separate thing called self or ego. And that's what feels constrained, right? This sense of just this conditioned patterning. But it's just something that we've learned along the way. It's not actually all that much different from, you know, you get a new computer, it's nice and clean, and you start putting software on it. It starts behaving in different ways that we've programmed it to behave. And these body-minds have been programmed by our parents, by our teachers, by our first boyfriend, by our boss, by life. All of that is forms of programming. And when we start to listen to some of the voices that we hear, that we tell ourselves, that we've adopted as ours, we can hear, you know, mom, dad, things we've seen on TV, life experiences. I had this experience, so this is how life is, you know. Life is a rough and tumble place, dangerous, better not go out there. So we've taken on beliefs about ourselves and about the world, and it's all been learned, all of it. And it's been sort of churning around, and we sort of repeat it to ourselves over and over and over again. And every time we repeat the same story, the same thing that happened 30 years ago, the same hurt, the same blame, the same guilt, whatever it is, keep repeating it over and over to ourselves. And, you know, we try to make sense out of it, or, you know, try to find our position in relation to it. And yet, every time we do that, it is strengthened. We're giving it energy. And the sum total of all of that is what we think we are. We think that what we are today is the product of all of that. There's an analogy of a boat on a perfectly calm lake, and the boat's cutting across the lake, and behind the boat is all this, the wake of the boat, right, the disturbance from the boat. So the belief that what we are today is the same as believing that where the boat is a result of this wake, is a result of this disturbance, and then there's the boat. But the truth of it is where the boat goes creates the wake. Does that make sense? So where we are today, where we are being from today creates our past. It's not the other way around. Right? So no matter what has happened in the past, you know, we can learn from it. You know, as we said before, sometimes what's most transformative has been the most difficult, and yet it's the stuff that we still struggle with. So we can learn from it. We're not going to change it, right? So we can allow it to be there. But it doesn't define who we are today. So that's the ego, that's the me, right? Everybody have a good sense of that, right? We don't need to talk about that further, do we? I mean, just this sense of being confined. I think, Mark, you said the other night something doesn't feel quite right. You know, it's just like, yeah, I know this isn't me, and yet, you know, it's still somehow it feels like there's something I can't quite get beyond. I'm constrained by this, that the skin is too tight-fitting. Yeah. So there's two ways to go about this. One is what self-help, psychology, those kind of things are about. And that is about, you know, taking a problem and trying to, you know, sort of work it out, become okay with it, you know, love it, allow it, you know, all of that, one by one. That's the long road. I mean, it's fine. It's fine to do that. It's fine to, you know, look at what's happening and see if there's a resolution to it. That's all fine. But there's really no end to that path unless it just totally exhausts you. That's the end point to that path, if you're fortunate. Because you can solve one problem, and I guarantee you there'll be another. It's just the nature of mind. It's what we've taught the mind to do, is to be on the lookout for things that could be problematic for us. And it's on the job. You know, it's ready to point out, you know, 10 out of the next 3 things that are going to go wrong. You know, so we go through life sort of on the lookout, you know, not trusting that life would actually, you know, be a beneficial place to be in, but just, you know, we need to be on the lookout, we need to protect ourselves, we need to be wary, you know, bad things could happen. And, you know, by trying to prop up this, you know, sense of self, this, you know, I'm this separate, independent self, I should have it together, and trying to prop that up requires so much energy that we have very, you know, it consumes a huge amount of energy every day for us, just physical and mental energy. And we don't even realize that until that burden is lifted. But we have to, so let's just do an experiment right here. I'm just going to count to 5. Okay? Everything that you didn't think of in those 5 seconds, like your name, who your parents are, what your profession is, what your problems are, how old you are, everything that you didn't think of in those 5 seconds, you have to think into existence. It's not who you are, none of it. We recreate it all the time, right? I'm so-and-so, you know, you just keep recreating the stories in our head. But what we are can't disappear in 5 seconds, right? I mean, none of us, still the same number of people here, right? I think nobody left in a puff of smoke or anything. Okay. So just in 5 seconds, you know, without thinking something into existence, where was it? But that's what we do all the time. We remember the stories about us. we tell ourselves, we go to work, every day it's a reminder of what we are, what our situation is, all of that. But which is fine. I mean, we all live in a relative world, and we have to get by in that. That's fine. But what we're looking at now is what we fundamentally are can't disappear in 5 seconds and then reappear again. So what exists in the absence of thought? So we're all
me.
Yeah. It's I mean, we're all experiencing it right now. We may be thinking at the same time. That actually doesn't matter. But it's just this, there is, I'm trying to think of another word we can use other than consciousness, but there aren't that many. I mean, if we're religious, we can use spirit, okay? Or we can use awareness. I like to keep switching it around so we don't get hooked on a word. But it's just that indescribable, almost sense of presence or aliveness. That when we counted to 5, that was all still present, right? Anybody unconscious during those 5 seconds? So that whole sense of personal self is something that we learned. And it seems to be, it's not bad. I mean, it just seems to be the normal part of maturing. Young children have certain behaviors, and then teenagers have other kinds of behaviors, and then we get a little more sophisticated and have adult behaviors and families and careers and opinions. And trying to stop anything, thought, or like you say, this energy suddenly arises, it has power, right? And the power that it has is what you give it. Only that. And the way you give it power is by energizing the relationship that you have with it. It's like being, fearful of that thought, feeling like I've got to think about this, I've got to work this out, right? That's different than just allowing the thought to arise. It may be painful, but it needs to see the light of day, and without judging it, whether it's good or bad, or I should think about it or shouldn't think about it. It's easier to do when we sense into this sense of, peaceful awareness, spacious awareness, however you want to think about it, and yet this can be there, and it can arise, and we can allow it to arise. It needs to arise. It needs to be seen. It's energy. It needs to be released. And the only way we can release it is by not judging it, not trying to make it go away, not arguing with it, not saying what should or shouldn't happen, which is an argument, right? It's just allowing it to be. It can be outrageous. It's okay. It needs to be heard, and this awareness can hear it the right way, and it needs to be heard in however it needs to speak. Don't try to spiritualize it. Don't just allow it to express itself. Yeah. But if you can also at the same time recognize that I'm hearing this from this space. It's not to diminish it at all. It's really to allow it to happen, because this awareness is already open, is already fully present to whatever arises. It's not It's not limited in any way. So it can handle what arises. It's not liking it, right? It's just, it's allowing it. It's to, honor the intensity of that energy and allow it to fully arise. Yeah. And if it feels totally overwhelming, it's also possible to say, I need you to back off a little bit right now. I need to, don't overuse that one, but it's like if it really, really is over the top too much, is to say, okay, let's do this a little more slowly. I'm up for it. I'm on board. I just need to do it a little more slowly. And yeah, it's there because it wants to be released. It needs to be released. Yeah. And trust it. Trust that process. Trust your body. Trust that awareness. It has a wisdom that we don't. Yeah. So this is the process, right? Is allowing these things that have built up over time, these beliefs about who we are, is to let those go. Okay, that sounds easier than it is, and it's difficult when we see ourselves as being only that. Then it's just one part of us arguing with another part, trying to improve ourselves, and we describe that. So the easier way is to recognize what we are first. It doesn't sound logical because we've been taught that you don't reach your goal until you go, no pain, no gain. You have to work all this stuff out, and then when we become perfect, right, then maybe we'll wake up. That's the belief, right? That it's all about self-improvement, sort of becoming more and more spiritual, and then one day we'll just sort of roll out of bed and we'll be awake. That's the theory, because that's how a lot of other things in life work. We study real hard and then we graduate. We work real hard and then we get promoted. This isn't about that. It's about recognizing what we are already, as is. Yeah. 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 I mean, the thinking and emotions are related. I mean, we can sit here and nothing much is happening in the room, and we can remember a painful story and we can feel it energetically, right? I mean, we can get sweaty, our belly can get contracted. I mean, we can feel it energetically. Just the thought, I mean, that's the power of the thought.
Which then I think reinforces
we relive it, it feels real. Yeah. And it actually, I mean, that thought pattern, that little whirlwind is energetically retained in our body somewhere. And we come back and revisit it and re-energize it every once in a while. And that's what strengthens it. And that energy is what needs to be released. And again, not by judging it, not by being antagonistic to it, arguing with it, retelling the story to ourselves about what should or shouldn't have happened, redoing the ending of the story, none of that. So it's just allowing it to arise again. But the two are related, we're sort of biologically programmed to feel good rather than feel bad. And so that's how we judge what's right or wrong. Okay, I feel bad, that therefore something is wrong. Something's wrong with me, something's wrong with the other person. I can feel it energetically, it's not right. So it's real easy to come to that conclusion. And then our mind kicks in and can further energize that feeling. So they work in tandem. It's sort of a tag team thing, emotion and thought. First of all, it's just energy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we think it's me. You know, anger is energy, right? But then we use the phrase, I am angry, right? I'm angry. Okay, for the math majors here, I equals anger. What I am is anger, period, end of story. So that we become identified with the energetic arising of the emotion. That's what I am. I'm angry. I'm an angry person, right? So it's not only just an energy that arises, it's then becomes a conclusion about ourselves. And then, we live life in relation to that, trying to suppress it, trying to justify it. All of which energizes it. And what we can do is actually look beneath that, because like just take anger for example. Anger, when we really look beneath that, there's what? Fear. Yeah. It's like I don't want to be seen. I don't want to be. My vulnerable side to show. I'll protect myself. I'll throw out some anger that'll push the other people away. That'll solve the problem. We don't think all that. We just react. It's habitual. But when we see the underlying emotion there of fear, then what's the fear protecting? What's that? We can say, well, maybe vulnerability, maybe guilt, maybe. So what's that? Can that be seen? I mean, this is just, doing a little archaeology work, just going deeper and deeper. And we can see, okay, that let's say there's some guilt there or some shame that I'm trying to protect. Am I willing to see that? Am I willing to allow that to arise? We get to the heart of it, because the anger really isn't the heart of it. It's really something deeper than that. So we can really just use that rather than, the anger happens and then we feel guilty about that. We pile on judgments on top of that, whatever happened. But, that's just complicating the issue. The issue is really, okay, the anger arose, what's that about? And being willing to see that. And seeing it really as instructive rather than, that's just how I am. I'm an angry person and I got to feel guilty about it on top of that. You see, it's sort of a dead-end street there. There's no resolution. But if we can see, if we're willing to really look at what's deeper than that, where does that actually originate from? And is that worth holding on to? Not judgmentally. It's just sort of almost an innocent curiosity, like, wow, where'd that anger come from? That's a different feeling, like I shouldn't be angry, right? Does that feel different? It's like, wow, that surprised me. Suddenly burst out of my mouth. I had no idea. But it's a different relationship with it. And that relationship is easier to be with when we're not identified with our thoughts and our emotions, beliefs, opinions. If we believe that that's who we are, then I get angry, that's who I am. I'm an angry person. But when we can really step back and look from a larger view that's prior to thought, right? Just to step back into this simple awareness that functional right now, right, everybody? So from that perspective, it's easier to see if we're grounded in that awareness, if there's a sense of, yeah, I've had all these stories, all this conditioning, this is my personality, that's all true. We're not denying any of that. We're not even judging any of that. It's just what happened. Okay? Sort of like getting your childhood vaccinations. We all got a dose of conditioning. Right? May all look different in different cases, but it's just what we got. It's just the hand of cards that we were dealt. Nothing more. But when we're grounded in a sense of, yeah, all that's true, and yet here I am. I exist prior to all of that. I exist. I'm here, I'm alive. I may not know what I means, but there's this sense of being alive, being here. It's undeniable. You can't say, I don't exist. Right? Who would say it? So the sense of existence is fundamental. You know. So there comes a point when there's actually a shift of identity from believing that what I am is the total package of conditioning, thoughts, beliefs, into recognizing that what I fundamentally are, that what I fundamentally am, is this simple, everyday, ordinary awareness. It's not even spiritual awareness. You know? You can call it Christ consciousness, you can call it Buddha nature, you can call it whatever you want, but it's still present now. If it's not present now, when is it going to be present? So when we recognize that as the ground of our being, of that is actually what we are. I'm not suggesting that you believe it because I say so, but just check in with it. You know, here we have something that, yeah, on the surface looks a little flimsy, I'll grant you that. You know, you can't grab a hold of it, you can't stand back and look at it. It doesn't have a shape, you can't, not much you can say about it, and yet it's always present. Everything else is subject to change. Everything else has a birth, life, and death. Jobs, health, age, everything. Everything's subject to change. You know, when the Buddhists talk about impermanence, it's like, no kidding, you know. It's presented as a profound concept like impermanence. Yes, I mean, can we not all see that everything changes always, it never stays the same, and that's what creates the anxiety, because even when things are going well, it's like, yeah, they're going well today, but what about tomorrow? You know, there's this sense. We don't use it the other way around, you know, like, oh, things are really terrible today, but hey, there's impermanence, so. But that's the, you know, no matter how, you know, by putting a huge amount of energy into our life and getting it together and having everything just right, and right relationship, right job, right house, right career, right 401k plan, all of that. You have it all together, and then never quite stays there. It just, there's always movement in it somehow. If nothing else, we age. There's lots of cul-de-sacs or places to get stuck even after recognizing what we actually are. Even after, you would think that wouldn't be true, but it is. That we can recognize that, yes, you know, for ourselves in our own experience, we can recognize that, yeah, what I am is consciousness, and it's not denying any of the other things, but what I fundamentally am is consciousness. And then you can get tripped out on that. It's like, okay, then I'm just above it all. I can just act spiritual and do whatever I do, and it doesn't really matter because I'm just consciousness, so hey. And people get stuck there because it's an escape from life. It's an escape from our own conditioning. So basically people are only afraid of two things, right? One is death, the other is life. And it's the fear of life coming back into the messiness of life that keeps people stuck in that sort of transcendent space. They using spirituality as an escape from life. But then the question is, okay, if you're that free, if you're free of birth, life, and death, if you're free from thought, are you free enough to come back into this world, into this body, into this situation? Are you that free? And that's the rest of the, getting free from ego identification is like halfway around the circle. The rest of the circle is coming back into embodiment, you could say, embodiment in these bodies, in this world, in this life, in this messiness. It's like those old pictorials of the Zen monk going up to the top of the mountain, transcendent, right, above it all, and then coming back down to the village. That's the full journey. So there's lots of places to get stuck, and because there's that sense of, especially when it's first recognized, there's a sense of real freedom from all of the messiness. I'm above it, hey, and it feels really, really good. And the tendency is to think of this is the end. This is the whole. I've seen the whole package, and in one sense that's true, and in another sense it's just another idea. And there's always more to see. About ourselves. There's always more to surrender. There's always more to love. So on the one hand it feels complete, and on the other hand that journey actually doesn't appear to have an end to it. Yeah, so surrender is an interesting term because on the one hand we can't actually do it because the one that's trying to do it doesn't really want to do it. The point of it is that in fact we already are surrendered. We may not like it, but we are. From the perspective of who we really are, this awareness is already surrendered to life. It's available to whatever arises without condition already. So in that sense, it's already surrendered to whatever's happening. Good, bad, indifferent, boring, exciting, challenging, all of it. The awareness is present to it without condition. So it's already surrendered in that sense. That doesn't mean that it's, if we have a choice in a certain situation, that we can choose to surrender to that situation, which it sounds paradoxical, but if we're going to make a choice, go ahead and make it. We're already surrendered, and yet we can choose to surrender. What's choosing to surrender is whatever conditioned part of ourself is operating at the moment. We can surrender to that arising, that emotion, that experience, we can choose to do that. What we actually are is already surrendered to it. It's already open to it, unconditionally, always. Reality doesn't have to argue, right? You know, when we say, well, the ego says this, reality doesn't say, yeah, but what about me? Right? Reality doesn't have to argue. If it's the only thing that exists, it doesn't have to put up a fight at all.